Welcome to the Back to Me podcast, where we help multicultural incoming freshman women and men manage their entire college experience throughout post-graduation to successfully transition into entrepreneurship and corporate workspaces as new hires.
Back to me. Oh, I turned it around. I'm back to me. I finally figured it out. I'm back to me. So when you think you have nothing, back to me. I go back to me. Yeah, I'm back to me.
Hello, everyone. It's your host, Yoli Tamu. As we continue to acknowledge the importance of Suicide Prevention Month, we wanted to highlight the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. In other words, DEI. In this week's episode, we are joined by Gaëlle Amazan, a proud Haitian American woman and the Assistant Vice President of Student Success and Strategic Retention at Wiley University in Marshall, Texas. Ms. Amazan shares how the implementation of DEI on college campuses empowers students of all diverse backgrounds with an emphasis that is rooted in love, faith, and kindness. Find out why diversity matters and why attending college can give you the time and space you need to find your purpose and your identity. Enjoy. Wow, we are in full swing. The school year has begun, and I'm definitely feeling it. You feeling it?
Same, absolutely, I am.
Already. But we're so grateful to have Gaëlle Amazan with us, Assistant Vice President for Student Success and Strategic Retention at Wiley University. How you doing?
I'm great. I'm recovering from the school year already, but we're doing really well.
Oh my God. It's like we've been in school at least 2-3 months already.
That's exactly how it feels. That's a great way to put it.
Oh my goodness. Well, hey, we are here and we are mentoring and teaching and serving as example for these students. So
yes,
to push forward. So I'm so grateful to have you. Dr. Paris Carter recommended you. He's been an incredible mentor of mine for years.
Same.
Oh, he's an amazing person. So I'm so glad that he recommended you. And so we always love to introduce our audience to you and your motivation. Like, what motivated you to pursue and help young people?
So I think everything starts from my upbringing. My family's from Haiti, and I think I can attribute everything I am and everything I've become from my parents. So my father's name is Paul. My mother's name is Gabrielle. They immigrated here from Haiti in the early 80s. And I was born in Brooklyn, New York, raised in New Jersey. And they really wanted my brother and I to have a better life or an opportunity at a better life. And since I was young, my parents said, you're going to college. And when you're young, you really don't know what that means. But because I had the idea in my mind, my whole life, when it came time for me to go, it was a no-brainer. And so I'm pretty shy and quiet when I was young. So when I get to college, I went to Temple University undergrad at the time in Philadelphia, at the time, 35,000 students. So with the strict Haitian parents and my shy, quiet side, going to a college campus with 35,000 people was daunting. But I saw these group of students. They were OWL leaders, they were orientation leaders, and they were responsible for helping to transition new students to the college campus. And even though I'm shy and quiet, they really inspired me. I said to myself, I want to do what they do. So that was my first job in higher ed, was the OWL team. The following year when they had interviews, I attended the interview and I was hired. And I got to do what they did. I got to see the quiet, shy student who was scared to be in college, and I got to help them transition. And that experience stuck with me through the years. I ended up serving in that role throughout my time at Temple, as well as working as a student worker in one of the offices, the orientation office. And I just loved the opportunity to be involved and to help students transition to college. After that, I went to do my master's program at NYU, where I got to work in a research lab on this idea called stereotype threat, which is this idea that in the presence of a social stigma, like, for example, Black people are not smart. When that stigma is activated, like when Black people are taking tests, it can impact how they perform on those tests. And it's used to explain why people of color tend to do worse on standardized testing. And then I reminded myself of how I felt in high school, how I didn't feel as smart as others, how I didn't feel like I belonged in the classroom, which was just a lie. I was just as smart in the classroom. I did belong where everyone else belonged, but this stereotype, stayed with me. So I got to work in a lab where I got to see that many other students who looked just like me experienced the same thing. And then when it came time to pursue my PhD, I remembered I really enjoyed higher education as a student, but I also love this idea of supporting Black students who are going to college. So how can I merge these two things together? So I decided to pursue a PhD in higher education, which is where I'm at now. I hope to be done this month or next at Syracuse University. And I get the opportunity to do both those things, support Black students who work in higher education, who attend higher education, who may feel like they don't belong, when really we do. And then when I think about my upbringing, I'm a daughter of Haitian immigrants, but I grew up in the United States. So even though Haiti is a Black country, growing up Haitian and an American nation is different because culturally they're just different. So I became passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion and what it looks like to support people of all backgrounds, whether that's race, gender, sexuality, ability, health, citizenship, socioeconomic status, all these different things. And I recognize that all of us have different things that we can bring to contribute something. And that's what motivates me. My parents and their influence, my own fears and the ways that I've overcome those fears, and just being passionate about Black students in higher education. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. You were very clear in knowing the target. And that's important, I think, in education to identify, especially when you're in a higher education level, who you're targeting and who you're serving, and that there's a connection to that student, because that means everything. This is the beginning of their life, their adulthood. And so your example is everything. So that's fantastic. Now, when we talked earlier, you were talking about diversity and inclusion and how being Black just doesn't exclude you from other forms of discrimination. It's like we're Black on top of, judged for our sexuality or whatever the case may be. Can you speak to that when you say other forms of discrimination?
Sure. So I think I've always identified as a Black person, but as a Haitian, I think my identity had some nuance to it. And then I'm a woman. So just in my household, as an example, I was told things like, Gaëlle, girls are not supposed to do that. Like I might watch my brother leave the house and hang out with friends. But if I wanted to do that, I wasn't allowed to do that. So I learned young that there were different expectations for genders. And then when I got to college, I saw a whole wide variety of expressions and identities. And I was interested in historically Black colleges, but I grew up in a state that didn't have any. So my counselors presumably didn't encourage me to go there because they want you to go to school in state for financial reasons. But, I heard that the historically Black college or university is a space for Black students. So I said, okay, that means everyone who identifies as Black should feel comfortable in these spaces. But when I began working in these institutions, I learned that, yes, many people who go to those institutions or our institutions, yes, they do feel like they're empowered regularly due to their race. But if you're a woman, if you're a lesbian, if you're transgender, if you have identities outside of cisgender heterosexual identities, then you might experience a different set of challenges that someone who's straight or cisgender might experience. And when I reflect on my own experience as a woman, a Black Haitian woman in my own household, I recognize that the Black men in my family just were able to maneuver through life differently than I was. And then I said to myself, well, what impact does that have when we talk about college student development and when we're trying to develop leaders from these institutions, from all higher education institutions? How do we promote these systems that oppress, even though we're an institution that's supposed to empower us to be great? Can we be empowered the best way that we can be if we're only empowering one part of ourselves? Can you empower my Blackness, but disempower my womanhood? Does that affect how my Blackness is empowered? So that question rose for me over the years too. So I'm very much committed to helping Black people in particular understand that loving me means loving all of me, not just the parts that you're familiar with, the parts that you're not familiar with, it's up to you to educate yourself, just like we educate ourselves on race and our own history. We learn the term revisionist history. There's things that we were taught when we were young that we're unlearning today. We can do the same unlearning around these ideas like gender and sexuality. So it's a topic I'm very passionate about.
I love that you brought that up. I mean, it was just a reminder that, we have so many discriminating topics to deal with or issues to deal with all the time. And so on this platform, we service that incoming college freshman and that outgoing senior, and they're both dealing with the anxiety of new environment. And, being Black or being of a different culture, it can be daunting. There's so much to consider besides academics. It's the social, it's the social dynamic. So you and I spoke about, heavily about the importance of inclusion. And so I also know that we have all kinds of listeners here, administrative listeners from high schools and even, vice presidents of colleges and such. So all of them need a better understanding, I think, of the value and the importance of inclusion. And you talked about leading with love. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So I also want to go back a little bit and say, I unfortunately did not get the privilege and honor of attending an HBCU, but I do want all the listeners to know that during a time where we were not allowed to be educated, where it was illegal for us to be educated, historically Black colleges, churches, religious organizations are the reason why African American people were able to receive an education. So that part, the significance of historically Black institutions really cannot be understated. So I want to make sure the listeners are aware of that. While I may have some recommendations for how we can be more inclusive, it's really important for people to understand how significant these institutions were historically and today.
Absolutely.
So this idea around leading with love, one of the criticisms I get is, Gaëlle, you're too nice. And people are going to take advantage of you and people are going to run all over you. And, I have to develop a certain amount of discernment, just like anybody else. But I just think that the world has so much misery because there's so much pain, there's so much fear. And I think people react and respond to that. But why not react and respond with kindness? Like, what if everyone was just nice?
Right.
And I talked about historically Black colleges, many of them being established by churches and religious organizations. Many of our institutions are rooted in faith. So there is a higher power around our beliefs and our purpose and our why. And I'm a person of faith. I'm a believer in God and a follower of Christ. And that's what that is about. For me, faith is all about love. Mm-hmm. And when I think about like the population, the historically Black college in particular was designed to serve, that's what we needed was love. Like we needed an education, but we really needed love. So for me, DEI, like, yes, it's about understanding differences, but it's really about love, sharing it, experiencing it, receiving it, because when that is the root of your work, then really we wouldn't have, I think, some of the issues that we have when we talk about like our differences and things. So I do think it's important in terms of inclusion and our work as administration, or if you're a student, how does this decision I'm making, how do these words I'm speaking, how do these thoughts I'm thinking, how do they lead with love? And if they're not, how can I transition them so that they are leading with love, especially if you're a person of faith? Because for me, as a follower of Christ and God, that's what all that's about, is leading with love. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it speaks to our spiritual foundation. It's like if you don't have one, then oftentimes you cannot relate or you choose not to relate. Do you ever have students ask you, why is it such a big deal to really promote diversity and inclusion? Why are, certain backgrounds or societies just so opposed to diversity and inclusion? Do you ever have students just ask you directly why you think that is or why they think that is?
Yeah. And I think there needs to be a recognition of this country's history. Mm-hmm. And it's not a friendly or positive one, how we Black people ended up in this nation. So for one, and as a Haitian person, I think I add another perspective to that too, as the first Black Republic, Haiti, shout out to Haiti. But I think when we are aware of our own history, it helps us understand why we're here today. Because that question really comes from a lack of knowledge around history. Because if you know how we ended up here, you know that I didn't just end up at a historically Black college. There was a time where it was illegal for me to read, or people who came before me to read. So when it became legal for us to read, there needed to be institutions and people willing to work at these institutions to educate generations of people who were not able to be educated. So the question around how we ended up here or why diversity matters, it matters because populations in this country were given a head start. And yes, there are some institutions that are ranked very high, and that's great for them. But it's easy to be number one when you're the only one running the race. What would it look like if I and my ancestors were allowed to be in those classrooms in the 1600s? Do you think our institutions would look the way they do today? No, they would not, because of our history. So part of this is, yes, learning about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but really, like, it starts with knowing our history and not just knowing the nice parts of it. So we have some states who are trying to ban critical race theory. And just as an example, but banning our history causes, I think, a sense of confusion for those of us who don't have equal opportunity, for those of us who have to work twice as hard to get half the credit. Then we experience dissonance, because if we have to ban topics around diversity, equity, and inclusion, there has to be a reason for that. So I think I just went off on a tangent.
I mean, you're speaking to the heart of it. And I asked the question because I get asked the question by students, like, what is the big deal? You know what I mean? Like you said, why can't we all just have a fair opportunity? Why can't we all just love one another, be kind to one another? And I just tell them it comes down to fear and power. Period. I mean, it's that simple. We can talk about the spiritual foundation as well, but there's, it's a power dynamic involved. And if you're looked at as getting ahead or being above another person doesn't want that to happen. Some people don't believe in equality. They don't see the value in equality. That's the real conversation. And I didn't even know that was the real conversation, that I know that I do not want to be equal with you just because.
Mm-hmm. And I think, like, one of the things I tell students is people can't give you what they don't have. They don't have joy and peace. They can't give you joy and peace. If they have misery, that's what they're going to give you.
Right.
So that's something that, like, as I go on my own healing journey, on my spirituality, I have so much peace and I can share it. So when we go back to leading with love, you can't give what you don't have. And you might think you have love. And I think there's those of us who believe that I don't discriminate against anybody. I treat everyone the same. I love everybody. But really, if you have unhealed trauma, or if you can't understand or accept how our nation's history has contributed to where we are today, I really have to ask you if you're really leading with love. Because love, and part of this comes from scripture, love requires accountability. A person who loves you can't let you do whatever you want, because that's not love. It becomes some kind of abuse or narcissism. But true love requires that I acknowledge when I did you wrong. So if I was wrong and I hurt you, if we love each other, I have to be able to acknowledge that I did something wrong. If I can't acknowledge it, then there's no love. And I think some communities who refuse to acknowledge that slavery ever happened, who refuse to acknowledge that racism exists, can never lead with love, because you're already ignoring the atrocities and tragedies that took place and how it's contributed to where we are today.
Absolutely. I'm just so glad we're having this conversation, and I feel like it's going to always be relevant. It's definitely relevant now in this election season. We're just seeing it all. It's all pouring out all over the place, and I just find that young listener hopefully will be encouraged by this interview, where they would just go onto the campus, know that there are these concerns and these issues, but that's somebody else's issue. That's somebody's lack of accountability. Definitely know that you deserve the fair shot and fight for it regardless at all times. Never second guess yourself. And I found that when I attended at HBCU, that was like instilled in me. That was day one. I think I had Black psychology class. That was one of the required courses. So I think about the college campus, and when they enter for the first time, how some are considering, taking career pathways, vocational programming as opposed to college. But I wanted to know from you, what do you think makes attending a college still relevant today towards a person's success?
Yeah, I love college. I loved it so much. I pursued a degree in higher education, and I continue to work in colleges. So I might have a little bit of a biased opinion, but I think about the decisions I wanted to make when I was 18. I wanted to be a dance major, and I was going to be a choreographer and dance on someone's music video. And, you live life a little bit and you realize that some people get to do that, but not everyone gets to do that. But when I went to college, I had an opportunity to think about what my purpose was. I had an opportunity to figure out my why. And I follow this pastor. I think I talked to you about him, Pastor Darius Daniels. So he says that, for those who are trying to figure out what their purpose is, your purpose is rooted in what you're uniquely agitated by. So whatever bothers you, if there is something that you have a problem with, you might be uniquely designed to address that problem. Because it doesn't uniquely bother me because I'm not assigned to address that problem. You are, because you're uniquely agitated by it. And college, because it's not just about the classroom, it has this really powerful, magical way of making you confront some things that you might be agitated by. So college is the specific controlled environment where you can discover your purpose. So to answer the question around why does college matter? It's because people my age and older still don't know their why. They don't know why they're here. They don't know what purpose they're here to serve. But a college environment causes you to ask questions that you might not ask in other spaces, causes you to have deep conversations and ask yourself the hard questions around your why. So I think that's the value of college. I also think that when I was 18, I thought I knew everything. I'm an adult now and no one can tell me anything. And you know that 18, you're just getting started. So college is also a place where young adults can make mistakes and still figure out how to become an adult. And college can help prepare young people to become citizens, to vote in this election and ask the questions that's going to make you make the best decision for yourself. So not to say that you can't get some of these same skills in a work environment, but I do think college specifically offers a learning opportunity that you wouldn't be able to get outside the space. And the last thing is I met my best friends in college, and no one gets to the top of a mountain alone. Everyone needs help. And I think you can find your tribe in college, which you might not be able to find your tribe outside. You could, of course, but the people that I'm best friends with today, the things we've gone through in the last 10 years, I never would have imagined doing it alone. So I think those three things, college is a unique space to find your purpose, to make mistakes in a controlled environment, and also meet your best friends, people who are going to be with you. And young people may not be thinking about this now, but right now it may be about college, but in 5 or 10 years, it's going to be babies and marriages. After that, it's going to be aging parents and health issues, things you're maybe not thinking about right now, but college helps you, I think, deal with those things in different ways.
Mm-hmm. So good to hear that the social impact it is very important on that campus, because you can be on a vocational setting, really being trained in that field. But yeah, that social piece of college life, it does impact and help your entire life. Thank you so much for that. So now, we always love to wrap up with these final words of encouragement. And man, you've definitely been doing it, but I've been thinking about our listeners. And, it's a new semester. We're just embarking on a new challenge, a new experience. But for that listener that might be entering college for the first time, do you have some encouraging words for that person?
Yeah, I think I reflect on my own experience. I didn't know for sure what I wanted to do. And I think people run away from that as if that's a problem. Because we want you to choose a college and choose a major. And these are decisions that matter, but uncertainty is okay. So if I had to give advice to somebody, it's that I would lean into the uncertainty, because I talked about purpose a couple minutes ago. The truth is you're going to have a billion purposes, and that's great because you're meant to have a number of different skill sets. College can help you identify one or more, but really you're not here to do just one thing. So if you're not sure, that's a good thing. Let's try to identify all the things that you enjoy and all the things that are going to be lucrative too, because we've got to make sure you can pay your bills. So I encourage them to be okay with uncertainty. College is specifically the space where being uncertain is actually okay. Yeah, you may have to make a decision about where to go, but administrators, faculty, and other students, the conversations you have with friends, people you agree with and don't agree with, are really going to trigger questions for yourself. You may be exposed to things that you've never been exposed to. And that's really what development is about, is being stretched in ways that you may not have expected and being brought down pathways that you didn't expect. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that there's a lot of well-intentioned people who work in higher education, a lot of nice people who cause harm. And there's a saying I heard that I really love. It's that sincerity is not a substitute for skill. So you can be sincerely wrong, but sincerely, right?
Right.
Wrong.
You had a good intention.
These young people, like, they be on social media going, and it's my opinion, so I'm right. Okay. Opinions are like, you know what? Everyone has one. It doesn't
Everyone.
make it right. So I bring up the sincerity part because, yes, we need to be sincere, but it doesn't make up for the skills we have to develop to actually do a job. So that speaks to students and the practical skills you'll learn in college, but also to the people, the administrators and faculty who are interested in DEI work, or anyone interested in DEI work. Being sincere doesn't preclude you from having to develop the skills to do that work. DEI is a skill that needs practice, much like any other skill. I claim to be able to do jobs that I was not skilled in. So if I was running for president for the United States and I didn't have, I don't know, a law background, for example, maybe I wouldn't be running for that position, just as an example. It doesn't mean you have to have one to do it. But the point is, certain skills are required to do this work. So I hope that's encouraging. Just that uncertainty is okay, but it takes a lot more to do what we do than being sincere. It takes staying educated, remaining current on what's happening in the world, not being married to what worked for us 20 years ago. Yes, tradition matters, but this generation of students has a different set of needs. So how are we making ourselves better to address the needs of those students?
So be able to back up what you say is what I'm hearing. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being with us. Now, if they wanted to reach out to you and learn more about your university, would you like to send them to an email or LinkedIn, or where would you like to send our listeners?
Sure. Email, LinkedIn. And because I'm so passionate about DEI, I do have a small business. Dinclusion.co is my website. I'm happy to share that as well. But I do training developments for those interested in being introduced to diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So I'm happy to do that. I do work at Wiley University for those interested in attending. It's wileyc.edu. My personal email is Gaëlle, Gaelle, at ginclusion.co, ginclusion.co. Not com. People put com, it's co.
All right. Well, this has been great. This has been a very powerful conversation. And wow, you are sweet and you're very discerning. You're strong, very much so.
I feel like it'll be good. I feel like I'm not there. I have to develop that skill of discernment. And that's
really?
Too.
No, you call it out and you say it how it is. I love it. I love it. So glad that we met.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I look forward to speaking to you more. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. And I'm happy to talk to anybody who has any further questions.
I love it. Thank you. All right, you take care. We'll talk soon.
All right.
Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us. So the next time you're confronted with a debate about DEI, remember to lead with love with your thoughts, your words, and your deeds. For more information about other episodes, remember to subscribe to the Back to Me podcast, College and Beyond. I'm your host, Yoli Tamu. Leave a review at the end of this podcast, and if you would like to learn more about other special events, join the Back to Me podcast Facebook group, or simply text Back to Me to 833-206-4565. Until next time, be well.